and gentlemen, if I could have your attention just to bring this session of the Clean Energy Listening Tour to order. My name is Patrick O'Connor. I'm the State Senator for Weymouth and the Plymouth and Norfolk District, which extends from Weymouth down to Duxbury along the South Shore. I wanted to thank you all for coming here this evening. I know that there's a lot of activities going on in the town of Weymouth right now with the school department's budget being under review at the town council level as well as the town meeting a little bit later tonight. So with all those activities going on in Weymouth, this is an unbelievable turnout for obviously something that we're all caring and passionate about, which is the future of our environment. I was pleased to see the folks outside earlier today holding signs, as we have continued to do here in the town of Weymouth and throughout the South Shore for the better part of the past 2.5 years against the proposed compressor station in North Weymouth. It gives me great pride to say that we have had a concerted effort in the State Senate last year during the process in which we took a stance against fracked gas, and banning fracked gas in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as banning a pipeline tax. In addition to that, the State Senate took a stance in banning the siting of compressor stations near residential areas. Unfortunately, that did not pass in the House of Representatives, where there's been some sort of level of disconnect for the past some odd years in regards to specific policies that we see as priorities and try and get them passed. So before I turn this over to Chairman Mark Pacheco, I just wanted to thank the chairman for putting this on. This is something that he has embarked on approximately 3 weeks ago, and since then he has crisscrossed the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, making sure to hear from every single individual who wants to talk about any issue that's important to them in regards to making sure that we have a clean energy and clean environment for the future of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As you know, and Senator Pacheco being one of the leaders of it, we are under the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2008, and we want to adhere by those standards that were strictly put in place to make sure that Massachusetts continues to be the leader when it comes to energy efficiency and has been when it comes to green energy in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There's an excellent PowerPoint presentation that I know that the Senator has done in the past that talks about the amount of jobs that have been created and how large the economy has grown in the clean energy sector. And it's an honor to sit here with him, to serve on this committee which he chairs, as well as to serve with him as he is in the leadership capacity up at the State Senate. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the Chairman of the Global Warming and Climate Change Committee for the Massachusetts State Senate, Mark Pacheco.
Thank you very much, and I just want to say thank you to your senator, because Senator O'Connor has been one of the members in the Massachusetts State Senate that has been steadfast and very active on these issues that I care about so much. And I know that many of you, as I came in tonight and had the opportunity to speak to a few of you this evening when I came in, care so much about as well, in particular those of you that were holding signs out here, of which you allowed me to take a photo of you, because I want to make sure I post it up not only on my own Facebook page, which is Senator Mark M-A-R-C, not M-A-R-K, M-A-R-C Pacheco, and put that up on my Facebook page, but also we're going to try to get that up on the State House page, where our climate tour is being publicized at the state level. When you come in, I think Serena Tracy is back at the entrance of the hall on the right at the table, and she has information for you as you are to leave or coming in that will give you the information as to how you can interact with us, not only tonight, but after tonight's meeting. So you can tweet us, you can communicate with us, you can send us some communications. We will get back to you, and that's what this tour is really all about to listen to the citizens of the Commonwealth and see what they have to say about a clean energy future. Now, I'm not so naive as to believe that many of you have not been engaged with civic engagement with a number of organizations in Massachusetts. A lot of environmental organizations, a lot of organizations that are dealing with ensuring that we don't have a pipeline tax in Massachusetts, that we do everything we can to try to limit fossil fuels in the mix, and hopefully we can move towards, and we've been trying to do that in our state, move towards a carbon-free future. So that's really what we're trying to do here in the Commonwealth. Let me just say, and I'm not going to speak much longer because we're really here to listen to you. And your state senator also was going to have to go to a council meeting, which we didn't really think about when we were scheduling, this meeting. But I'm going to stay here and listen to you to the end. Maybe we'll still be talking, and he'll be back after the council meeting. But we'll be here and listen to you, and I certainly will hang around for a little while and talk to you individually if you're not inclined to get up to the microphone. But I just want to say that a lot of people are saying to me, well, isn't this different? It's nice that the Senate is out doing this. It's similar to the Commonwealth conversations that we did a while back. And I say to them, well, actually, it's not the first time that we did this. We didn't call it a climate tour back then. But before there was a committee on global warming and climate change, actually right at the infancy of the creation of that committee, I had approached the Senate President at that time to create a global warming and climate change committee. And back then, I'm talking about way back in 2006, 2007, 2008, there were a lot of people that thought I was a bit off my rocker. And that they were saying that by doing this and talking about this issue that we're going to kill jobs in the Commonwealth, and why did we need to move forward on this, that there were many more jobs that were created in the fossil fuel sector, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we went out, to the Berkshires, we went out to different parts of the state, and we listened to people, and genuinely, people came out at that time. Yes, there were some connections to environmental organizations, but people just came out and said, no, we understand this issue of global climate change, and we understand that something is just different. There was a lot of people that were of my generation or older, believe it or not, that were coming out and saying that, and people that were the youngest constituents in the Commonwealth that were coming out and saying it. So we had the very young coming out, and those of us that are young at heart coming out, right, talking about this issue. And as a result of that, we looked at the California model of the Global Warming Solutions Act, and we do what we do very well in politics. We borrowed it and improved upon it, and we went around and got that enacted in law here in Massachusetts. But you know who really got that enacted into law? It was the citizenry. Because we can talk about these issues and we can try to file legislation, but if we do not have the support at the grassroots level across the Commonwealth, coming up, standing up, calling their legislators, making sure letters to the editor go into the local papers, talking about these issues, then there are close to 6,000 bills that were filed this year in the legislature. And it's very easy for this issue to fall by the wayside. Well, what happened is we got it done that year. And if you remember, we had a governor that came in and a speaker and a Senate president all on the same page. And we passed a suite of legislation. Not only the Global Warming Solutions Act, that was passed in December of that year, I think it was in 2008, right? And then we had the Oceans Management Bill, we had the Green Communities Act, we had the Green Jobs Bill, and there were several other bills, a biofuels bill. There was a number of bills that we passed that year. And for all of the naysaying that was going on back then, now we fast forward. We're in 2017. And in 2017, compared to 2008, we, all of us together, fighting for these issues, have seen the creation of over 105,000 private sector jobs in the clean energy sector in Massachusetts. We have seen the creation of an $11.8 billion clean energy economy here in Massachusetts. We've seen over 6,700 small companies created in Massachusetts. A significant portion of them doing work in the energy efficiency business. And how many small trucks do you see now on the road with a company name in solar on the side of the truck, right? Solar installations, energy efficiency work that's being done. We're creating a new, clean, green energy future in Massachusetts, but my friends, we've just scratched the surface. We've got a long way to go if we want to meet the requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act. The Global Warming Solutions Act states that by law, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 25% below the 1990 levels by 2020 and 80% below the 1990 levels by 2050. That's the law. This year, we would like to add interim requirements for 2030 and 2040 and get rid of any sunset provisions that are in the existing statute. So it would be law 2030, 2020 rather, 2030, 2040, 2050. So that if any time during that time the citizens of the Commonwealth think that their government is failing them, that they'd be able to take their government to court to ensure that their government gets done what has been promised to them. Those are the requirements of that statute. That's how we're trying to improve upon them. That's an example of one thing that people can come forward and say, geez, I think the 2030, 2040 standards, it's a piece of legislation that's filed. It's one of those 6,000 pieces of legislation. We have legislation to create a renewable portfolio standard. Get rid of the cap on net metering. We have legislation on offshore wind to create another 4,000 megawatts of offshore wind. Off the coast of Massachusetts, we are the Saudi Arabia of wind.
Yes.
We could do much more in that regard. So there's a lot that we can do, but instead of me talking at you about what we can do, I just wanted to give you just a brief history about what has already been done. And what we did was we did it together. Legislators and citizens engaging with one another to create that movement of citizen engagement so that this stays on the front burner every week. Senator O'Connor, myself, the other members of the committee, we need to keep talking about this all the time. Because the week we stop talking about it, it goes away. The week you stop talking about it, it goes away. So we need to keep this momentum, so let us begin. I have a number of people that have signed in this evening, and we have a column that says interest in speaking, question mark, yes, no, maybe. Believe it or not, we have a few maybes, so I think it's going to be depending upon what some people say as to whether other people will come up. So I'm going to have somebody that has a solid yes and ask Paul Lowenstein from Sharon to come up first to get us going. And then I may be going to Patricia Burke next because she said yes / maybe. So Patricia, you'll be thinking about whether or not you'd like to go forward as Paul speaks. Paul.
Thank you very much, Senator Pacheco. Is this turned on?
Just speak right into it.
How about that?
It's on.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Pacheco, and thank you, Senator O'Connor, for holding this hearing. It's a real privilege to be
Let me
here.
just do this. It's the plane at the end, you know. So.
Oh, no, I do.
There you go.
Thank you very
And
much.
then if somebody's a little shy, just pull it down. A little tall, just pull it up and get right up next to it, okay? Okay. All right, I'll have you go up after. All right, go right ahead, Paul.
Thank you very much, Senator Pacheco and Senator O'Connor, for this opportunity to speak. At a time when greenhouse gas emissions are threatening our very existence, spending over $6 billion to expand gas infrastructure in New England is insane, especially considering that demand response and energy efficiency are less expensive ways to meet our energy needs. So why are we even considering such a dangerous and unhealthful expedient? Follow the money. The price for liquefied natural gas is much higher in other parts of the world than it is here in New England. Stockholders and executives of gas companies stand to profit from the export of liquefied natural gas, despite the long-term negative consequences for the rest of us in terms of climate change. Ill-advised expansion of gas infrastructure, including the proposed compressor station in Weymouth, cannot be accomplished without the complicity of our government. In the wake of the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, the deep-pocketed fossil fuel industry can easily buy influence with elected officials. Until we amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United and level the political playing field, focusing our finite capital resources on transitioning to a clean energy economy will be an uphill battle. I urge state legislators to support the We the People Act, H 1926 and S 379. Massachusetts, the cradle of American democracy, should join the other states that have already called for a convention to propose a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United by establishing that corporations are not people and money is not speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Patricia Burke.
Hi. We need to stop meeting like this.
Yeah. Patricia, I'm going to, if you don't mind, because Patricia has been at all of our forums so far.
So I'm speaking for an organization.
Yes, I understand, but we want you to speak, but in terms of the information, we have a lot of people that are here that want to speak, and I don't want to shut you off, so we're going to let you have a few minutes.
Okay.
But if it's anywhere close to the last couple, I'm going to have to say,
Well, I was translating for
yeah,
someone
well,
else.
I understand, but, so
So-
go right ahead and please be brief, because you're
Thanks.
just talking to the same two guys you talked to the other night.
Okay, thank you, but the rest of the
Okay.
people haven't heard it. So I'm asking for
But it's
passage.
not about, I understand, but I want to make sure everybody knows, this is not about everybody else hearing it. It's about us hearing it, that are then going to take your comments and go back and try to act on them.
Yes.
So go right ahead.
So we're asking for passage of Senator Kulik's bill, which will allow any group of more than 10 ratepayers to intervene at the Department of Public Utilities, because at this point, the ratepayers are sort of excluded from that process, and particularly the smart meter bill, because the Department of Public Utilities relied on the testimony of a tobacco scientist to justify the safety of smart meters, Peter Wahlberg of the Product Defense Firm Gradient. So no one in Massachusetts with a medical degree and no professional engineer has signed off on the safety of the smart meter technology. There's no surge protectors. There are multiple problems with the meters, the sizing of the fuses, and ratepayers in Massachusetts whose housing for the meters has deteriorated will have to pay the cost to have that replaced if the utility decides that their home can't accommodate the meter. And this cost hasn't been accounted for, and the health effects haven't been accounted for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, you were great. Thank you very much. And we've noted Senator Kulik's bill and some of the other information that you told us on the smart meters and the opt-out, provisions and so on. So thank you very much for your testimony. Next, Lisa Jennings from Weymouth. You didn't think I was going to get to you that quick, huh?
Yeah.
It's all right. Take your time.
So I appreciate you guys coming out. I'm glad to start participating, I guess, at this level. North Weymouth resident, and of course the compressor station, and really all the activity that goes on down there is becoming more of a concern. But really also, as I follow, or try to figure out some of the connections and how this really, the information that we get from regarding our energy and how it's consumed by residences versus businesses, and it's a very confusing thing I think for consumers to try to figure out the balances here. What risks, what communities are willing to take, can take. And I think as a resident, as a taxpayer, everything else, I feel like we need more information too. I need more information about some of these bigger things. I have friends up in New Hampshire who are concerned about the Northern Pass. Some of the, so we find out, I find out about things about, when they're already gone through certain regulatory processes, and now, the fight is bigger, right? We have a lot of people here who are like, how did it get to this point? And it seems like those flaws are in how the energy companies and organizations trying to get their, commercial enterprises out there to help us get our energy in the first place, because we all know we need it, don't necessarily have the same incentives, right? The financial incentives and other things. And it's hard to for us to wade through all of that. I guess that's what we rely on our representatives to, guide us through. I think, when energy, when they're the ones who are also writing the regulations, that complicates things. I have a really hard time, when I keep hearing about the flaws in the studies. They're conducting the studies. They're guiding the legislation. So, anyway, I guess that's the biggest issue for me as a, as a citizen, as a person just trying to figure these things out. We're connected so much more to our friends and neighbors in other parts of the country who are also struggling through these things. And when they're getting information up in northern New Hampshire saying that this Canadian electric Northern Pass, I think it's an electricity grid, is being maybe New Hampshire will get 10% of the energy, it's coming to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And when they go to our sites, they're saying, we don't want it, we don't need it. Like we're creating we're looking towards the sustainable energy here in Massachusetts. We don't need to be importing it through these lines anyway, I think I made my point. I can't figure out this stuff. I know there are people who are working on it all over, but how do we get that information to then come back to you and say our priorities are mixed. I want energy at an affordable price. But not at the expense of my air quality, my communities, waterways, and everything. Everything's connected. So I guess that's it.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and let me just say that I think in that statement I heard, how are we able to be better informed as citizens? And that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight as well, is to try to, not only listen to citizens, but to try to let you know that there are a lot of organizations out there, and there's a number in the room tonight, and I see you with a sticker on, so maybe you're a new member of one of the organizations, but in particular, if you care about environmental related issues in general, if that's one of the passions that brings you out tonight, that there's a number of environmental organizations that are here tonight, and also we're very active and we're very fortunate here in Massachusetts to have a number of them. And I would suggest that, whichever one it is, there's a whole range that are out there, and the Environmental League of Massachusetts is sort of one of the umbrella organizations that has a lot of other organizations, whether it's Sierra Club, the Climate Exchange. I mean, there's a whole range of organizations, and if you come up later on as you testify, you might want to mention a couple of them, because maybe some people that are sitting here may want to connect with an organization so that they can be better informed, because that's what happens. People, you give the email address, and before you know it, you've got information that comes to you, and to the extent that you are connected in some way to the internet or at the local public library, go down there and have somebody help you with it. If you're technology challenged, as I am, then when I don't have my staff, I try to go to like my nephew and my nieces to try to tell me what to do, or an elementary student will help me out very well these days. But there are ways, or contact your legislator. You've got a good legislator here who will help you and get that information, so please do that. Any other comments on that? No, that's great. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So, next, Judith, do you want to come forward and just give us your whole name and tell us what you want to tell us?
Judith Van Hampton Hull, and I'm president of Sustainable South Shore, and active in 350 Mass South Shore. But I'm speaking out of my interest in the transportation part of clean energy. Right now, 45% of the emissions from Massachusetts come from transportation. And that's partly because we've done a good job at closing coal,
If you just want to take that microphone, turn it a little bit towards you. Just, no, just leave it in the holder, but
turn it this way.
just like that, but go right up close to it when you're talking.
Okay.
Just
Oh,
like
that makes a big difference. Okay, so let me just say, 45% of our emissions come from driving, from transportation. And both, I'm used to one that goes like this. Okay.
No, just
Like that. Great, okay.
just like that song, Let It Be. Let It Be, and it'll all be okay.
Both of you have taken leadership on this particular topic, in filing the Solar Mobility Acts that you have filed, and specifically the standards by which private enterprise can provide solar personal rapid transit on public rights of way. Not everybody in this room is familiar with that. I'd like to share a website that we put together. It's Bay State for Massachusetts and Sunway, like the sun is shining, .com, that has the bills that you two have filed on it. And I really appreciate your leadership and understanding how important this is. Today, I traveled a little bit by bus between here and Quincy Center, and we could be doing so much better on the South Shore, let alone in Boston or any place else in Massachusetts, if we had solar personal rapid transit. For people to imagine it, if you can imagine being in a ski gondola with solar panels up above, that's private, that is just for whoever you want to be traveling with, from 1 person to 6 people, going just to your destination at least 37 miles per hour, and small and silent so that it fits into the landscape. Instead of 3 buses, to get from Hull, where I live, to here, was, depending on the time of day, a 2.5 hour or 3.5 hour traveling with 3 different buses. It doesn't make any sense. And so the faster this gets passed, the happier I'm going to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your Senator O'Connor and I have got different pieces of legislation that deals with solar mobility, basically looking at ways in which we can power transportation or individual transportation, utilizing solar as a way to power that system. There are some suggestions that are out there where some private companies are saying that they can generate about 1 megawatt per mile, creating energy, where you have pods or individual cars going overhead, so that you wouldn't have a fuel source except for the sun, with battery and storage technology as part of it, and looking to see where there might be opportunities for demonstration models to see whether or not this type of system could be potential for the future. I know 37 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour might not sound like it's all that fast, but when I think about my commute this morning, that averaged about 10 miles an hour on average. That's what the Dukakis Center study indicated the average is now on I-93.
Could I add one?
A little over 10 miles an hour, believe it or not. So we need to be looking at some other systems. If we wait long enough, how many remember the Jetsons? There's a few that remember the Jetsons. So you're telling me which generation you're in. But pretty soon we won't only have autonomous vehicles, we'll probably have individual transportation vehicles that we'll be able to just click on and go somewhere. But anyway, you'll be hearing more about this because Judith and a whole range of people will be coming up to the State House with various pieces of legislation that have been filed to begin the dialogue in earnest about other methods that we can utilize in trying to embrace a new vision for public transportation here in Massachusetts and in America. You might want to say something about this.
Yeah, this has been one of our priorities, and this was another piece of legislation that we were able to get passed in the Senate, but then did not have as much success over in the House of Representatives. I think that when you look at a lot of the clean energy future initiatives, even those that right now the technology is still developing or still has yet to be perfected. It's now is the time for us as legislators, in my opinion, to give those innovators and those engineers the opportunity to get access to right-of-ways, to get access to transportation initiatives in order to be further along their current, their current innovations to really make them what we envision to be the future of clean energy here in Massachusetts. And I think Judith made a great point that with the structure of 45% of our current greenhouse gas emissions coming from transportation, transportation is going to be the focal point of making sure that, outside of making sure our buildings are as energy efficient as possible, but making sure that transportation is efficient as possible, not just in the aspect of clean energy, but for also the aspect of productivity. When you're talking about it, I take that commute in almost every single day to the State House, and I have for 9 years. I don't know if Senator Pacheco has for a lot longer than that. But it's tough, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that with like-minded folks such as yourselves and us up there working in a bipartisan fashion for this, may I add, we're hopefully going to make strides and hopefully going to get a lot of this legislation continued past the Senate this legislative session, and we hope through the House.
Thank you.
Great. Gary Reed from Sharon?
I'll do a maybe.
No, okay. He was a maybe. All right. So pass. And then a Steve Weiner? Weiner. Okay. I had 3 ways to do that, and I messed it up. It took me the 3rd way to finally get it.
I'm Steve Weiner, of Cohasset.
Yes.
Thanks so much for your leadership in green energy and climate change legislation. I just want to make a plug that you raised to the top of your priority list 1 or 2 bills. The carbon tax bills, there's one before the Senate, one before the House.
We have no carbon tax bills before us.
But we don't call them that.
No, but because it's not a tax. We have carbon pricing bills before us.
Carbon pricing bill, okay. Which are revenue neutral, as I understand, at least one of the 2 bills is, and the other one is not quite, but it has other desirable attributes. So I assume that the Senate and the House can get their heads together and come up with a good bill. But I want to make the point that I think this should be a very high priority among the many climate change related bills that you have to consider. We're at a very critical time right now because
Step a little bit closer.
there are some tipping points, positive feedback loops, the albedo in the Arctic due to the melting of the ice and then the dark ocean absorbing much more heat, the melting in the permafrost and the warming of the oceans and the acidification. There's some very critical tipping points now that could kick in a very serious way, so we have no time to lose. And I think that if we can push these bills through, make these carbon pricing bills law in Massachusetts, that will have a very important impact far beyond Massachusetts. We can show the rest of the nation that it's possible to have this kind of policy and where the people will accept it and benefit from it. And I think that the public will accept this and will show them it will lead the nation in how to control carbon emissions.
Thank you. I just want to say for the record, so that it will be on the record, that there are 3 bills that are filed relative to carbon pricing. We have no tax bills filed. There is a difference in terms of how legislation is structured. So there are 3 different carbon pricing models. There is a revenue neutral bill. There is an 80-20 bill. Basically 80% is revenue neutral, 20% is invested back into bringing carbon emissions down. And both of those are done regardless of whether or not we're meeting the targets or not. We have an administration which has agreed with the legislature, Republican administration that's agreed with the Democratic legislature, that we should have requirements to get greenhouse gas emissions down. The governor's agreed on the 25% below 1990, agreed on the 80% below 2050. He's agreed on 2030 standards that are set by the Paris Agreement. He has signed that initiative singularly as a governor. And the administration is signed on in the last session, although it did not become law yet, didn't get to his desk. But the DEP has been supportive in general of having interim targets. All of that is very positive. One of the things that the administration has said no to, however, recently, is a carbon price. The way two of the bills have structured a price. The price is set forth, and I won't get into the weeds tonight, but it's so detailed and so prescriptive that they don't leave a lot of room for other alternatives. I understand your testimony that there's ways to work it out between the House and Senate to come up with a version that's workable. I just want to let you know, going into next year, which is an election year, the ability to come up with 2/3 override vote in the House, which is what would be required, and 2/3 in the Senate is what would be required to do over a governor's veto, I quite frankly don't see happening. The third carbon pricing bill says that the price would not be implemented if the requirements are being met. So in other words, the only way a price would be implemented would be upon the failure of the executive branch to ensure the reductions in CO2 emissions, methane gas, all the greenhouse gas emissions. And quite frankly, I think all my friends in the environmental community have been in agreement that from a Massachusetts perspective, if we're able to surpass our requirements, we've done our share for Massachusetts. Now that doesn't mean we couldn't be an instructive teacher for the rest of society about what could happen on a carbon price. You know, a lot of people are advocating for the carbon price because they want to make sure we have all the tools in the toolbox to get down to the numbers we need to get down to relative to greenhouse gas emissions. I can tell you that if we spend all the time in the Massachusetts legislature talking about a carbon price, I can guarantee you we will not see renewable portfolio standards done. We will not see additional wind approved. We will not see all the things that a lot of other people care about relative to stuff that we know works and will get done. I just wanted to put it on the public record that I'm the author of the third bill, because I have been the previous author of one of the other two bills for 4 years. That means 2 previous terms. And I know how urgent this issue is. And that's why I don't want to sit around and wait and waste time fighting for legislation that we've already had one branch of government say they're not signing. And we need to get 2/3 vote. So I'd rather try to, get to where we can on all these other issues that will make a substantive difference in bringing greenhouse gas emissions down. If we get our hydroelectricity in place, and if we get the offshore wind in place, as a result of this new procurement that just went out, we will be up, and by 2030, we'll be up to 30% renewable. You know, we'll get a bill out there, 100% renewable, right? That I'm signed on to. We're going to start making progress very quickly in these other areas as long as we really, really stick to it. And we don't have any one bill throw all of our attention in that direction, because as soon as that starts happening in the legislative process, we get a problem. So anyway, that's just, you know, 2 cents worth for everybody. And I support carbon pricing. I think it's very important. It's instructive, especially what they've done in Canada, the western states and the Canadian provinces, what's happened in other places in the world that have done this. But make no mistake, in other places in the world that have done it, they have done a carbon tax, not the other scenarios that we're talking about here, which is very different because it changes markets when you're doing that. And I'm glad to see at the federal level, believe it or not, even though there's a walk away from the Paris Agreement, although it hasn't been repealed yet at the federal level, that there's been more talk with international trade around having carbon be a piece of trade into the future. So we'll see how that goes. It's something that's beyond our level of government, but I certainly want to put all the tools in the toolbox at work to try to do what we can do. So, okay. The senator has to leave to go to your city council meeting, and I will continue to be here, and we'll continue on, and we're going to be welcoming you back in just about an hour after you do your presentation.
Hopefully. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Betsy Severs, I might be saying that incorrectly, from South Weymouth. Okay.
Hi, it's Betsy Sowers.
Sowers, okay.
From South Weymouth, and I'm also Minister for Earth Justice at Old Cambridge Baptist Church.
Great.
And I have written comments which I will leave with you, so I won't say everything that's here. And again,
And if you have written comments, by the
Yeah.
way, Reverend, thank you very much for bringing them. Because those of you that do have written comments, even if you've spoken already, and you have written comments and you want to supplement your testimony, please get them into us, because that way we actually take your comments and get them out to the other members of the committee as well, and those that are not only on the committee, but on other committees like the environmental committee, etc. We'll get them out to everybody.
Great. Thank you again for everything you've been doing on this front and for what the Senate as a whole has been doing. And the comments I wrote this afternoon after spending the morning down at Lakeville at the DEP with a number of other people from this room. So my concern is that the Senate and the House can do all kinds of wonderful legislative things to advance the Global Warming Solutions Act, but the regulatory system is broken. And actually I have a question I'm going to toss out to you about. I'm not exactly sure how much power the legislature has in changing the regulatory rules at the state level. I know you can't change them at the federal level, although you can ask them. But again today, and I've been to a lot of these meetings, I observed that the folks at the regulatory agencies, even though in many cases they're people of goodwill who really want to do the right thing, are prevented by the regulations from lifting their eyes above the 50 check boxes of the little arcane technical things that have to be checked off in order to grant a permit. They can't lift their eyes up to see that the coast is going underwater and that we can't breathe the air here. And it's just extremely frustrating, and I have several examples of that, and I won't give the whole ones. I just want to give you bullet points, and the details are in writing. the first point was just that the cumulative impacts of air and water and wetlands and wildlife and human health and all this stuff, nobody ever looks at the big picture. It's always looking at one little piece of it. And it's amazing. It's not good for the companies either, it feels like to me. We want to have responsible businesses be able to get their permits. They have to go through all these different agencies. We have to go through all these different agencies, and we have to figure out at every agency what it is we can talk about at that agency, because you can't talk about water, the air quality and all of those, and you can't talk about how they interact. So that's one. The second is the air and water and health studies and the environmental justice studies, in many cases just don't get done. And we had here on the South Shore to raise money amongst community members to buy our own air quality monitoring devices, because the air was measured up in Dorchester or Roxbury, having to do with the compressor station here. And those reports actually have just come in, and found, among other things, that there's, in some neighborhoods, 4 times over the EPA limits of benzene already, before we even think about permitting new infrastructure. But that study was never done. And if we're paying our taxes, why aren't those studies being done by the agencies? And there's things that our legislature can do to make those studies happen, that people in this part of the world have really wanted and deserve everywhere. The third thing is the way too cozy relationship between some of the regulators and the agencies, and the revolving door in between those, and there are details here that to share. So I will skip the rest and just give that to you, but yeah, my summary is I was just thinking of Elizabeth Warren as I live today, and talking about how the system is rigged. It just feels like even the people of goodwill within the agencies that want to do the right thing can't do it, because the system is rigged to check those boxes off and get the permits done. So if we're going to meet those Global Warming Solutions Act targets, we got to do something about fixing the regulatory process. So I really appreciate what you're doing, and I'm interested in your comments on where you think the legislature has some leverage in this situation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Betsy. Reverend, thank you very much. I want to say that I couldn't agree with you more, that there are a range of situations at the state level and certainly at the federal level where our present regulatory environment was developed with different goals in mind. Goals of having energy, primarily fossil fuel driven energy, right? In another time in our history, wanting to make sure that there was reliability for that energy that triggered almost anything else. Making sure when you turn the switch, the lights go on. That's a significant part of the regulatory framework. Make sure there's flow of energy and that energy is reliable. In the last few years in particular, there has been a change of attitude within the legislature, and actually within 37 states in the United States of America, in terms of state action, looking at ways in which we can embrace a more clean energy future. There are problems that we have under the existing system, because the existing system has a set of perverse incentives. right? That don't necessarily get us to where at least most people in the room here tonight would like to see us, get to. That's why, through the rules in the Senate, we have actually changed some of the rules in lawmaking this session. Where we are now sending any of the bills that come over from the House to the Senate, or within the Senate, that deal with any type of fossil fuel emissions, anything to do with fossil fuel technology, anything that impacts global warming, that they now come to the Global Warming and Climate Change Committee for review. And they come there so that we will look at those pieces of legislation through the lens of the Global Warming Solutions Act. Is this bill before us, if passed, will it advance what our outcomes are going to be, what we'd like to see them be under the Global Warming Solutions Act? So that's one thing that we've tried to do. Having said that, we just had a meeting internally in the legislature about the regulatory framework that you just mentioned. Some of which we can't do much about because it's really falling under the FERC, or the federal energy requirements. So that's very different than what we're able to access. People like Senator Markey and others, Senator Warren. Senator Markey in particular has been a fighter on these issues for a long, long time in terms of global climate change. So there are some leaders at the federal level looking at, these things. But you're correct. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of the regulatory framework and what needs to happen there. In terms of your second point about the coziness or the relationships between, and you didn't say this, but I'll say it, between a lot of the utilities and the regulators, and how sometimes it's sort of like musical chairs between the utilities that then sit on the regulation committee relative to DPU, and then being in DPU, and then being on the board. When they get off of DPU, they're on the board of one of the other, regulatory, organizations, or get on the board of one of the utility companies or one of the big power companies. The only thing I think we might be able to do on that is to create some daylight between service with an industry before we allow somebody to come back and be on the regulatory side. I'm not sure constitutionally if we could just prohibit somebody outright, but we might be able to have some regulatory framework, and we've been looking at that a little bit in terms of what we can do on that. So I hear you, and because I actually had even a poor answer for you, at least you understand that some of us have been thinking about these things, and we don't have, there's nothing in the existing bills that have been filed that I'm aware of that would get to both of these, but I can tell you on the regulatory framework, there's a lot more that's being done to respond to what is happening in the clean energy sector. Because the clean energy sector is requiring that we take a second look at some of the regulatory requirements that are there to allow the market to be open to things like demand response, for example, as a way to bid into the grid, so that clean energy companies that are doing energy efficiency will be on the same level playing field, as a fossil fuel company, for example. So those types of things we are considering and we're working on, and I'm pleased to see that we are starting to move in the right direction. But we've got a long way to go. That's why we're having these hearings, to try to have the question that you put forth so eloquently, have everybody, start to think about that more seriously, and allow us to be able to tell you that we do have the ability to look at legislation a lot differently. So that if a regulator or a utility were to file legislation that would allow more options for them to do exactly what we're talking about, then when it gets over to the Senate side, I then finally have an opportunity to say, wait a minute, I think we need to do a timeout here. We need to write this a different way so that it not only deals with making sure power is available to everybody, but what kind of power do we want for everybody? Do we want clean, renewable energy power, or do we want to have it be fossil fuel based? And once we get more of a consensus legislatively to get to that clean energy sector, then a lot of other changes follow from there. So that's the best answer I can give you off the top of my head, but I'll be glad to talk to you about it afterwards as well. So we have Susan Green, that had a question mark here. They have Susan, you know if you want to speak? She's coming forward. That means that Susan's going to speak. All right.
Hi,
Hi, Susan.
can you hear me?
Just pull that microphone up.
A little bit?
All the way up, a little bit more. Right there, that's good.
Thank you.
Nice and close.
I appreciate everything you're doing. I didn't have anything prepared to speak, but I'm just concerned. I'm going to live right in the incineration zone of this proposed compressor station, and between the Department of Environmental Protection that doesn't seem to be protecting our environment. I get it that the regulatory system is rigged, and I get it that it's been doing this, that they've been doing it like this for so many years that everybody's just used to doing it without considering the environment. I mean, just on the face of it, between all the polluting industries in that area, the densely populated area, the fact that it's going to impact so many people and their health, these compressor stations are usually put off way in no man's land. I mean, this should not have gotten this far. This is just, it's just ridiculous. And so there should be something that's done even before it gets, step one should have been safety. Safety doesn't get considered until after everything is said and done, like at the West Roxbury lateral. They weren't talking about how to evacuate people or what to do if that active blasting quarry set off their metering and regulation station until after the fact, until after it was up and running, and that's ridiculous. In January, now Spectra/Enbridge say they have state-of-the-art safety equipment. Well, they didn't know they had a leak in the Fall River in January. It was a citizen that smelled the gas. They have nobody on site, which they're not going to at the compressor station. So it took maybe an hour and a half for somebody to get there. Took them another 45 minutes to turn the gas off. If there was any point of ignition, there would have been explosions within 100 to 300 feet. There are other industries, the Calpine power plant, the pellet plant. They're all storing acids. They're storing combustible oil, the oil tanks. I mean, we're talking multiple explosions. So when I say I'm in the incineration zone, I'm in the incineration zone based on if that compressor station wasn't sitting beside all these other combustible sources. So that incineration zone is going to be exponentially increased. And so safety-wise, if something happens, they just set up a perimeter. Right now it's about maybe a quarter to a half a mile perimeter, and they can't come in and get us. We're on our own to either self-evacuate or go around and evacuate our elderly neighbors that can't get out themselves. And if all these other things also blow up, and all the cars that are stored over there, whatever that auto dealer place is, if they all blow, that's one explosion right after another, that they're probably not going to be able to get to us for about a mile. They're going to have to make a perimeter and just wait hours while we're living in a war zone. So it never should have got to this point. There should have been some stopgap there because, first of all, this is an export pipeline. It is not for our need. The Attorney General already did the study. This isn't something we need. If we needed more gas, they could fix the leaks that are all over this city.
Susie, you did pretty well without the Let me just say, for the record, again, as you all know, your senator here, Senator O'Connor, has been a staunch opponent of what is taking place and has been leading the effort in bringing your concerns to the forefront in the legislature. And I want to let you know that I was one of those legislators that voted with him, opposed to what Specter is doing, and the majority of the Senate did the same thing. So I would urge you, in terms of your politics around this issue, in terms of getting the message out, to continue talking to the House members, and quite frankly, continuing talking to the executive branch. I know it's frustrating to sit at DEP, but it's, and you have one of your members that's been sitting in the executive branch. I'll take you out of turn, because you deserve it.
I won't touch this thing because it hasn't been working. Can you hear? Yes.
No.
No. Hello?
Yes.
I'll speak very loudly. I'm Andrea Honore, and I've been sitting, today is day 49, in the governor's office until he takes some action regarding the Weymouth compressor station. So, yes, so far, not much is going on, but I'm going to keep doing it and keep asking people to join me. I was going to ask if there's any way we can put some more pressure on DEP. I'm not even going to address, because there are people who've already addressed the DEP Spectra, sharing of letters, and here you can edit this, and you can edit that, and you can have what you want. But how can we get an air monitoring station in the Four River Basin area? That's one of my questions. And the second question is, how do you get through to Governor Baker? Like, how does the person get through to Governor Baker? I saw him walk by me today. I'm like, hey, and he's like, because all that stuff is going down to DEP in Lakeville. And I went, hello? And then he was like, he was pretty grumpy today. But, he said, his constituent services said he does not want to talk about the compressor station. Well, guess what? Thousands and thousands of people have called in 2.5 years, written, marched, you name it. He'll talk about health care on a federal level that he has no pull on, because he always says, oh, it's a federal thing. He'll talk about, what is it, staying in the Paris Climate Agreement, but all these other people, lobbyists and whatnot, can get access to him, but citizens can't. Like, what's up with that? Some advice would be nice. But also, thank you for your work. And part of your words inspired me to sit, have the elected officials get to know your name. I didn't do that yet because I've been doing everything on social media. So I owe you a debt of gratitude, really.
Well, I recognize Thank you for true citizen engagement. She Commonwealth Conversation meeting, I think it was in Dedham, or,
February 28th, that was the first day I did it.
yes, and she testified before us, and she told us she did it that day, and she was going to be doing it every day until she could talk with the governor. So, talk about follow-through. She's been doing it every day. And she has been a tremendous role model for those two young girls that are sitting with her as well. But, you know, there are other people that would like to come and sit with her. That also brings about more attention, you know, related to these issues. And sometimes it might be interesting if you were to possibly, you ask for some advice, and I'm not going to give you too much advice in that regard, Andrew, because I've been asking the governor to talk to me on a couple of things, and he hasn't returned my call either. So.